Coming from Aarhus University, the Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation, where I'm both a researcher, an educator, and a consultant. I'm originally from India myself. I come from the northeast state of Meghalaya, but I've been working in this center for the last few years, and I've been in Denmark for almost the past decade or so. And I think it's very interesting that I came to this gamification conference. As you can see, I was supposed to be here on the October when it was supposed to be held earlier, but then it got postponed a little. But I'm very glad to be here, and also thank the organizers for inviting. And I'm actually very glad that I'm following Yukai to talk about this. And I think it's actually a very good follow-up about just what he has talked about. And I've met Yukai before a couple of times. So and I think Yukai, you've done a great job because you've taken a lot of load away from me, so I don't have to explain a lot of stuff. So that's very nice. But I'm probably going to take you to a slightly different journey, a journey that I've personally been involved with, and I think I wouldn't say that that I had gamification in mind when we started it, but we just sort of embedded it, and I think that's the most important take-home message that's going to come out to, and you'll probably see why that is important. So, I guess most of you are now back from the break. This is the title of my presentation. And before I go to that, I think we should take an ad break. We've taken a coffee break, but we should probably take an ad break. And I should say this is not sponsored. Yep.
सूरज की किरणें झलमल झलमल लागू हुई है हलचल हलचल सूरज की किरणें झलमल जागो हुई है हलचल इंद्रधनुष के टुकड़े लाकर घोलो उनको रंग बनाकर धरती का हर कोना कोना अब तो अपने मन का होना नाम ना हो अब रंग ही पूछे लाल हो दाढ़ी तो हरी हो मूछे धूम धड़ाका हो छपर छपर हो कोई न टूटे हर रंग इधर हो धूम धड़ाका छपर छपर हो कोई न छूटे हर रंग इधर हो छोटा बड़ा काला सफेद ऐसे रंग दो के रहे न भेद छोटा बड़ा काला सफेद ऐसे रंग दो के रहे न भेद खुशबू का कोई रंग बता दो हवा के पंख में बांधो उड़ा दो खुशबू का कोई रंग बता दो हवा के पंख में बांधो उड़ा दो धूम धड़ाका छबर छबर
तो रंग ही नहीं छूट रहा है।
वार्डन काका, रंग कितने रंग के होते हैं?
लाल, नीला, पीला, हरा।
हरा कैसा होता है?
अब कैसे बताऊं तुझे?
Some people have probably seen it also before, so it's not the first time. This was filmed in 2007, and it was playing in the TVs quite a bit. For those of you who might not know what the festival is, it's the festival of colors, festival of Holi in the spring, And it's one festival which the people in India celebrate with great gusto. And what I really liked about this video when I watched it was that actually you could actually see some elements of both gamification in here, but at the same time there was something very touching about the fact that people could identify that anyone has the right and can and should have fun. And so if I try now sort of sum up, so what have we learned by sort of seeing this video? I think one is that we should not jump to conclusions, and that could have been quite easy, because if you didn't notice or did not pay attention, you might not have noticed until you saw right at the end of the video that this event was happening at the School of the Blind. And I've talked to some people who have also seen, and they were also quite surprised. And again, people have probably been moved, which is why they have gone for eye donations. And I'm not here to promote eye donations or anything like that, so let me clarify that. But it's just that, it's just to show that how these things can affect us. The other thing is that visually impaired children can also have fun, and that if you realize in the way they behaved, in the way that they did a lot of stuff, these visually impaired children were in many ways, except one, which is that they don't have sight, similar to every other child. So, but if you think about visual impairment, a lot of people, I can see at least quite a few here in the audience have glasses, so we probably have poor vision. I have poor vision myself. I've had glasses since I was a child, and yeah. But it was not only it's not just some people have average vision, some people have great vision, some people have poor vision. So you have all these grades of visual impairment. Then you also have, for example, color blindness. So I don't know how many of you here can actually read the number. So most of you can apparently read the number. So, and that means your eyes can sense color, and that's pretty good. But there are quite a few of us who actually cannot sense color. And just to show you the implication of that, this is the implication, which also has safety implications, is if you can't see the traffic lights, then you can actually, it is dangerous to not only your own health, but also to others' health. So that's just one of the implications. And then again, now I'm just sort of getting into what visual impairment is, right? And then these are different types of color blindness. And then you start saying, okay, this is normal. A normal person can see the whole color spectrum, from violet to red and blue and all these colors. But those who can't see, they have monochromatism. That means you can only see in black and white. You can only you cannot see the red colors or the violet colors. So you have all these different type of diseases. And of course, don't want to overwhelm you. This is not something about that, but it's just to show you this kind of variety we have when we talk about visual impairment and how many people around us actually suffer from this. And some of this is avoidable, but some is not. And again, just to take you to some examples, this is normal vision. This is something called age-related macular degeneration, and this basically impacts the center of your eye, and therefore you lose sight in the center, and you can see how that impacts your sensing. This is the case if you have something called diabetic retinopathy. This is again a disease that can be both genetic, it can affect you because of your diabetes, if you develop diabetes, and again it's something that is once it occurs, you can probably cure it early stage, but you cannot cure it late stage. If you have glaucoma, your peripheral vision is impaired and only central vision is present. And if you have retinitis pigmentosa, which is a genetic disease, then you can only sort of, this is what is called as tunnel vision. So this kind of range of visual disorders that I've showed you basically indicates what we can see and what we cannot see, and also that some of these are, of course, avoidable and some are not. And I think if you look at some of these statistics, they're actually quite surprising. I was surprised myself when I saw this is the percentage of global visual impairment around the world, and apparently China and India are account for almost 50% of the visual impairment cases. And what is even more interesting is that 90% of the world's visually impaired live in developing countries, So this probably gives us a hint about something. And again, if you look at how many people who get, so this includes people who have any kind of visual impairment. So not just blindness where you cannot see at all, but any kind of visual impairment. And again, China and India, and generally Southeast Asia, and also the Middle East rank very high as opposed to many other countries. But this statistic was something that really surprised me, was that 80% of all visual impairment can be avoided or cured. And if 80% of all visual impairment can be avoided or cured, why is this not? I mean, I don't think this is a new statistic. This data is actually from 2010, but it hasn't changed. It still is. It still is today. I checked the World Health Organization pages some time back. The WHO reports 517 million people in developing countries are visually impaired, just to give you sort of a scale of the problem. Another Center for Vision in the developing world at Oxford University, they have done a study, and they found that it's actually more than 1 billion people need but do not get visual correction. And I think that's something which is very surprising as well. So apparently the solution has always been that, well, early detection. If you can get your eyes tested early, you will be able to prevent a lot of these disorders. But that's one of the reasons. And so, for example, if you had diabetes, you could diagnose diabetics early, and you could sort of prevent the onset of DR. If you had this trachoma is actually a parasitic disease, very much in Africa, in some parts of India as well. It's actually a parasitic infection which is waterborne. And again, if you can detect the parasite early in your bloodstream, you can actually take care of it. But many cases, by the time the patient reaches the doctor, it's already too late. Same with cataract, which is another. Cataract is actually, I think India rates the highest in cataract, where basically your corneas or your eyes sort of solidify. And again, if you could detect early, you could actually do some kind of surgery, and then you would be given glasses that could help you, get your vision back. And of course, if you generally have poor vision, you can also just give glasses. And I mean, it's also very important to stress here that if you don't wear glasses while you have poor vision, they can actually go so bad that you can even lose your sight just by the simple fact that you can't see properly, for example, because it stresses your brain and the body as such to try and compensate. So let's just look at one possible solution. I've just given you like the range of solutions. And if you just look at one possible solution, we see poor vision, and that is, if untreated, can lead to blindness. And probably the easiest solution and the cheapest solution that exists out there, if you take away surgery and all those other more expensive solutions, is actually glasses. And I'm pleased to say that since my parents were fortunate enough to give me these glasses from a young age, and I stuck onto them despite being, despite having a lot of social stigma that was attached to it. I've been called four eyes and whatnot during my school days, but at the same time I persisted. I'm happy to say that at least my power never changed, and it has not changed the last 10 years, and it has remained the same, and that's because of this early intervention. And then, of course, a lot of NGOs and a lot of aid organizations have sprung up. One of them, for example, is called Vision Spring, and their mission was, of course, to provide affordable access to eyewear everywhere. And they are very active in India, in Africa, in Asia, in general. However, Vision Springs almost went bankrupt. Almost. They have survived very recently. But the reason they have been able to survive is because, and this is the founder or the CEO of Vision Springs, where he used to say that there wasn't enough money coming in to support the operations. They realized that you could either be a really nice, perpetually subsidized NGO, or better yet, change the business model so that you would not need subsidies. And it was only when they started changing, and today they're actually a B Corp or a benefit corporation registered in the US, which is a legal entity where you have to create benefit for society as well as shareholders. And they have created a business model that allows them to sort of run this kind of vision help where they blend this NGO and corporate model. So, and again, what Vision Spring did very unique was, instead of donating, they actually started something called selling our glasses. And they still have the donate option, but it was selling the glasses that was something that was very unique that Vision Spring started. So why is this? Why am I highlighting this? The reason I'm highlighting this is that many a time, especially in the developed world, there's this tendency that, okay, we need to help the developing world by, giving stuff, by donating stuff. And a lot of articles found out, and there was some basic scientific studies conducted which proved that recycling eyeglasses is actually a feel-good waste of money. Donations of eyeglasses in poor nations are better than recycling used pairs. So, and the reason was basically economic, is that it costs more to collect all these glasses, these used glasses, take them, distribute them, and supply them, as opposed to providing new glasses to the people who need them. So, and of course, Vision Spring started also working with things where, we need to have a frame for every face, and their target was basically, this is like the world, just like if you look at the World Economic Pyramid, you also have a World Glasses Pyramid. And Vision Springs decided to look at what we call the bottom of the pyramid market. That is, this is approximately 4 billion people who cannot afford, for example, expensive eye care. And their approach was basically a high volume, low margin approach. And they even did that by creating a model which would generate jobs, self-employment, and create these kind of vision entrepreneurs who would even earn rupees 40 for every pair of glasses sold. And that's in India. So, many other NGOs like Vision Springs have of course sprung up. You have Sight Savers, Sight of the World, the Helen Keller International, Christopher Blindell Mission, and many more. But the cumulative impact is still but a few drops in the ocean. And even though some of these NGOs are more than a decade old. And this is what I really would like to highlight, because this problem is actually not new, and we have known about this problem for quite some time, but we have not been able to bring down these numbers as much as we would like to. I mean, and I'm actually very grateful that all these organizations are doing all the work that they are, and even those few drops, of course, matter, but it's just to show you the scale of the problem. So, and the problem still persists. And one of the cases, this is very recent, this is a 2012 study, it was published at the Indian Journal of Ophthalmology. This is a study done by Maulana Azad Medical College from New Delhi. And they screened for visual impairment. And the outcome amongst school children, I think they took about 5 schools, more than 2,000 children they screened. And the data they found was something like this. Why do children refuse glasses? So the problem was not the fact that they were being given glasses. The problem was that they did not want to wear glasses. And that, if you see this data, what they found was, for example, girls especially in the rural areas, they were concerned about marriage prospects. So they would not wear glasses even if they needed to, because they sort of 82% of them thought that they would not get a marriage partner. For the boys, that wasn't apparently a problem. For boys, it was more peer ridicule. Or what they were more worried about was how the peers see them. This kind of, they were more worried about bullying and those kind of things. And of course, and the monetary constraint, this was actually very low. So the fact that money was the reason for them not getting access to these glasses, this was very low. So, and I mean, this is just to indicate that we are having a problem of glasses in sort of a different way than what we have always thought about it. And I will highlight, so that was one case. Another case I'm going to highlight just to show you why it's a multifold problem is a bachelor thesis done in Sweden, which focused at an area of the east coast of Tanzania, a small island called Zanzibar. And what she looked at was trying to find out, and the Zanzibar is this very small island over here, and she just looked at one region in there, and she did a thesis on trying to find out young females' reasons for dropping out of secondary school in a place called Matamwe. And these are the reasons that she found. And it was very interesting because how they correlated. I won't go through it in detail, but just to give you an indication, and bad eyesight is just one of them. So of course, if you had bad eyesight, it would mean that you would have to repeat your school, you would have to repeat your classes, you would have a problem in learning the language that would impact your English learning ability. If you had menstruation, that would affect you going to your school. To school. Marriage was a problem. There was distance to school, role models, harassment, hunger, pregnancy. I mean, there's so many factors that actually interacted. You couldn't just say that it's just one factor that works. It's actually a multitude of factors, which again indicates that when you have a multiple factor problem, you need a multi-factor solution. And until now, what has been happening is that people have been thinking that visual problem, it's a health problem, and therefore needs a health intervention. And therefore, the most people who have been tackling this are medical doctors. I'm not a medical doctor myself. I've just learned about all these things myself. But it's only doctors that I have interacted with before. And I'm here presenting at an audience that probably has no doctors around. And we probably are sitting with corporates, with some kind of people with IT backgrounds or different types of backgrounds. But it just and I think the way we started working with this was when we realized that when you need a problem so complex as that, you actually need different types of brains to come together to solve these kind of problems. And again, why is it not just a health problem? Is because it has economic, educational, and public safety educations. If you, for example, did not have glasses, you would probably, not go to school. If you didn't go to school, you would probably, stress. You would not get as much chance to have a better life as someone else. Therefore, you would sort of reaffirm the poverty cycle that you're already in. So you're unable to break out of the poverty cycle. That can lead to discontent. Discontent can lead to public safety implications because you could be involved in riots, you could be involved in many things because so you can see how these things connect with each other, and it's both at a policy level, it's at a basic level that we need to start thinking about these, and again in Tanzania, for example, they found that 71% were dissatisfied with their ability to do near work, and near work means you need near sight, and that is cooking, reading, sewing. And only 6% of them have glasses. So there's a big disconnect between the people who need and people who don't have. In India, 65% of the population needs glasses, and only 7 to 10% wear glasses. So I'm not saying about availability, because availability is not the problem. The problem is that they do not want to wear it for other reasons. So, and of course there are many reasons. It's both awareness, affordability, cultural biases, access, lack of trained manpower, which is a very common thing as well in India. So how could you actually sort of challenge this? And then I started to imagine, what if you viewed the world before? So and again, I'm going to focus only a small subset. So I started to focus on girls, because especially the problem was quite prominent in girls. But let's say that if you view the world before, where girls and boys don't wear glasses, they have poor vision, that's poor health, they have low education, they remain entrenched in poverty and safety issues, etc. And if a solution to the problem were to be found, what could the world after look like? So it's just sort of scenario thinking, And if this, and I think this slide from the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, sort of sums up what the world could be like if, for example, we just help this small subset of the population. In the UN, they found out that when 10% of girls go to school, a country's GDP increases on average by 3%. A child born to an educated mother is more than twice as likely to survive to age 5. Girls who stay in school for 7 or more years marry 4 years later and therefore have fewer children. 10 to 30%, every extra year of school increases productivity by 10 to 30%. Girls who haven't completed basic education contract HIV and AIDS 3 times more often, and we all know how big the problem of AIDS is in the world. And when women own the same amount of land as men, there's more than 10% increase in crop yields. And again, individual earnings therefore also increase by 10% for each year of school completed. And these were some kind of measured data which the UN, for example, have found. And again, it indicates why we need a better solution and not just the way things have been going. And now you might be wondering, am I or are you at the right conference? Why am I talking about all this stuff which is sort of not relevant? Well, here's the relevancy for you. The Financial Times teamed up with an international NGO, one of the largest, called Sightsavers, and they created an FT-MBA challenge. I took part in this as an alumni, with a part of a very interdisciplinary and international team. And the challenge was, how do you develop a business plan to market glasses to children or young people aged 16 to 25 in one or more developing country in Africa or Asia. Basically, what the NGO was trying to say was that we have tried our level best, we are unable to do the impact, can someone else do? Can someone else come with new ideas? And for some strange reason, they decided not to approach doctors, but this time they came to the business school instead. And basically they said that we need to target stigma to wearing glasses, because what they found out was that on the field, this was the biggest problem that they were facing. So this is what they had to do. And again, the question that then, of course, came in our minds as a team as we started to approach this is, can we actually make a change where others before us have failed? And it was a very daunting challenge. And the inspiration that I got for this actually came from gully cricket, from something which is sort of very, very different. A lot of people here probably know about gully cricket. It's cricket which happens on basically wherever you can find a place to play, or where you can have a bat and a ball. And here, for example, this photo shows these are all children of dairy farmers, and they come from different strata of society. And also, I've lived in Mumbai for a short time as well in the early 90s, and I used to play cricket as well in the streets. But what I realized over there is I come from a middle-class family, and when I went out there, I played with people from all classes. It didn't matter whether the person was rich or poor. When you played cricket, you sort of played, as a team. You would be two teams, but you'd still be competing against each other, but you sort of forget your differences. And I think that was something that inspired me, that, okay, what is it that is happening in that scenario where people forget the differences? Because what we need here, because, why do people make fun of you wearing glasses? It's because there's a certain kind of, it could be social class difference, it could be many other things. Social class I would like to highlight is because, one of the reasons is because if you think that you are from the lower class, you cannot afford the eye care, so therefore you will just, you'll be distanced in that way. So when I looked at this, I said, well, maybe it's actually the element of play, the element of fun that is actually very important to bring into this. And this was the basic inspiration for the idea that we started working with. And the video that I showed you was another inspiration, because what I also realized was that blind children are similar to other children, and they can enjoy and have the same amount of fun as everyone else. So the elements we started to consider was, well, fun, looks, price, and yes, gamification. We were all, it was a buzz. We were all thinking about it, and we just thought, let's just add all these PBLs which Yukai has just talked to you about. Because we just thought, very simple formula. Game is equal to play, is equal to fun, is equal to engagement, is equal to success, right? And therefore people will buy glasses, and we solve the world problem, and we save the world. And in fact, we probably would be even targeting one of the core drives for us as a team was this call to action, which Yukai just talked about. I think it's one of core drive number 1, right? Yeah. So, but after working on the solution for a while, we actually realized that the problem at the task was about stigma first and glasses second. It wasn't the glasses that we had to work with. And again, we actually decided to scrap gamification as the only tool to solve the problem. We started working with it first, but then we scrapped it. We then created a program to target the issue. After we created the program, we built gamification around and in the program, almost sort of like an embedded platform in it. And we also realized one very important thing is that a lot of issues tend, a lot of people try to, create things where everyone thinks that if we can create this one silver bullet, it'll solve all our problems. And as I showed you that the problem is so complex, we cannot have a one-size-fits-all. And again, the solution that we came up, the right side aim, was something what we took as, how can we convert stigma to aspiration? So that was our challenge for us. And we then worked on some sort of a grow model where we wanted to sort of change the stigma to aspiration. And we created a 4-step program. The program was where we had to both prepare, seed, nourish, and then flourish. And this is what we call our grow model. And this grow model is basically the full program, but you don't actually see gamification in it right now. But that's why I'm saying that the gamification that happened was sort of inbuilt in it, and I'll show you how this happens. So the ground that I talked about preparing the ground. The ground that we worked with was the target community. Who's the target community that we are going to work? How do we prepare them? So we decided to launch 3 programs at this phase. And I must say that this is the concept that site savers have now bought into. 3 programs were launched at the start phase. And that would be, the first would be a certification system, because we also identified that some of these trainers need to understand, and certifications in India and many other countries are valued a lot. A very strong awareness campaign, this is also very important, and some kind of teacher training workshops where you actually train the teachers. So we're not targeting the target group right now, but sort of preparing, well, they are also the target group, because to solve a problem such as this, you need to be able to reach to all levels of society. You need to talk to the teachers, the parents, the children, the government. So we started working with, okay, we start with this kind of activity. And now if you think about the game elements that are being put into this, basically, we introduced 2 basic game elements here. One was curiosity, and these awareness campaigns and everything, these would target how do you increase curiosity. The other game element was receptiveness, because you cannot just come up with a new thing, because people are generally either afraid or, the uptake to new things is always hard. There could be many of you from here, coming from different companies, who might be thinking that, well, is gamification something for us? And again, it's going to be, for some of you, it's actually new. So you might be actually wondering whether, whether you can actually be, use it for your own company. And again, receptiveness is basically why this conference here is also being held. You are being prepared to uptake it. Then we came to the seed phase. Here we started something called, this was our play and learn phase. So this was where more explicit gamification was introduced, where we started working with basically designing games. We created 2 characters, or 2 names. One was Spexy, which was a computer game concept where the protagonist is a female hero, and the other was Cluey, which was a board game version for people who didn't have access to computers or tablets in schools. And this is Spexy. She is basically a hero who's going to go around this game where she starts to actually solve a lot of challenges that are built in the game. But to be able to play this game, it can be played both single or 2 players. It's a tablet-based. She actually has to wear these special power glasses. She cannot actually progress unless she wears these glasses. There was also designware that was embedded, because design was very important. And then we also gave them many different types of power-ups. So one of the power-ups that you could find for a particularly tough level would be, for example, the power-up of super clarity. If you took that power-up, would you only be able to actually spot the clues that you needed to overcome that challenge? So that was, that was one way. And when we just took this kind of, the prototype of this hero and talked to children about it, a lot of children, their eyes lit up. They were very interested, because suddenly they could think that, okay, this is actually not that bad. This is something that we could relate to. But okay, what about people who don't have access to the game? We came up with the other one, who don't have access to computers, then we came up with Cluey. Cluey is basically a board game with different elements, cards, and different visual elements. What was important was that this had to be a learning tool. It had to be educational. We added some kind of hangman modifications. If some of you have played hangman, you probably know what it is. We added the element of curiosity, social contact, rule play, and time pressure. This is, again, elements of games which makes it very fun to play. You're given sort of an image like this, which you have to build up. Then you have to find a hidden word. And the important thing is that this game is being played by children who are visually impaired and children who have normal vision. So they will be put into mixed teams and made to play together. And why is that important? Because when they do that, that's the time when you can insert or inject empathy, as I call it. Because what you are doing at that time is that these people are playing, they forget their boundaries, and that's the time they realize, oh, this child or my colleague or my friend actually has a problem visualizing or seeing this. I'm here to help. But that sort of creates this empathy that is needed in encouraging uptake. Then they would find the hidden words, and there would be a lot of hidden words. So we are talking about 50 cards here. All these hidden words would then create a paragraph. Then you have to have a sentence construction as well. So there's a learning tool as well. That paragraph would then actually have a moral, which was, again, a moral to a story. So they have, and there's time pressure as well involved, and there's also going to be a sense of accomplishment because they're going to be completely, they would have done it. They would have done it in high time pressure, and they would be feeling great about it. But also they will learn and uptake that knowledge quite high. The other thing that we added, this is the third element in this phase, was the SPL kit, See, Play, Learn kit. This See, Play, Learn kit had 5 unique vision charts. We decided not to go through the conventional vision charts, which a lot of you might have seen with the letters, but just with visuals, fruits, animals, because these are things that children can remember. It's fun, and again, the fun was important. And people who could not remember this or couldn't see very well, they would then be taken up for follow-up tests to the doctor. They would be given a kaleidoscope, again, just to have fun. Fancy plastic glasses with different types of roles. So we would actually give them this kind of glasses and actually ask them to imagine when they wear the glasses, what role are they now playing? So it's kind of virtual role play. So you use the child's imagination. And then a 10-page booklet, which is both instructional but games, blindfolded games as well for normal users. Of course, a blindfold, so that again it's part of the empathy learning, and then foldable paper binoculars. So just to highlight the importance of vision, and again, all the time ensuring that this is a fun thing to do. Then we came with Nourish, and in the Nourish, this is the third phase of the program. What we have done is we prepared the field, we cleared a level playing field. In the level playing field, they've forgotten the differences. Now what we do is we come up with the more serious stuff, and that is we do a lot of vision testing camps in partnership with doctors, hospitals, NGOs. We then talked, we created something called modular glasses. This was created in design with a Canadian designer. This was for individualization. Then we talked to community workshops and a helpline for children under peer or family pressure. Many times, a lot of these children are unable to talk to their parents about this problem, and therefore there was a helpline also created so that children could talk to someone about this problem. If you look at the game elements that we now have included here, and I'll come more in detail, we included choice, we included competitiveness, and we included collaboration. 2 contrast things. These were also game elements that were inserted at this phase. One of them is, for example, the modular glasses concept. And this was, again, very unique because we wanted to give choice to people. And choice is very important because, what differences us is between the fact that we don't, that we have this choice to buy things or choice to take things. And this is as important to a person who doesn't have access to those who have access. We looked at customization. We looked at, of course, low cost, local manufacture. We tied up with an award-winning designer from Canada, and he designed a product with minimal components, and also local distribution nodes was thought into it. And at the same time, we added accessories so that you could take your glasses, each child, you could take it out, you could take off these side clippings and change with each other. You would have different colors, and colors that you could match with your dresses, but all at the same time maintaining this kind of low cost, and again, having it fun. And then the final phase was Flourish, where we harvest the good results, we learn from mistakes, prepare for a second iteration, which is like similar to a harvest, basically. We create these video diaries where people talk about their experience. They talk about the fun they've had, how their world has changed since they have glasses now. And we introduced rewards, which was a certification system feedback. The fact that you're doing this both for the teachers, for the voluntary workers, and also for the children who wear glasses all throughout. And then we created some events. Just like you have your World Sight Day, World Diabetes Day, we decided, well, there should be a spectacular day as well, where you celebrate spectacles. And then, of course, evaluations and impact measurements and communication of this to the outside world as well was again very important. And again, here, the game elements that we inserted here was this kind of affirmation, celebration that was, again, very important to target. So, as you can see, it was designed as a program. It ran from year to end, where we go through all the phases. And what you can see is actually there's a red thread of gamification that is inbuilt into the program. And this is why it is important that you can't just say that I want to gamify, because a lot of people think about gamification as a layer that you just add upon things, and that's not going to work. 80% of all gamification attempts tend to fail, and that's an industry statistic. So therefore, and that's why it's important that you can embed it into a program and think about the other needs. One very nice example I think about is if, for example, you come across a slave factory, like, for example, laws that is together with that, gamification is not going to help. But once you do that, then gamification becomes a very powerful tool as an embedded tool to actually bring the real change that you want to see. And again, the last part of this was that we also looked at was feasibility. It was very important that we had both free and priced products. And the free products were the games and SPL kits. These would include buy-in. And once they had buy-in, the priced products and services, the modular glasses and events are all priced events. And again, we moved away from this NGO model of charity, but actually making it because the reason or the moment you buy a glass, you actually have more ownership. You have more relationship with the product as opposed to when you just are gifted something. So that was very important. So keep in mind, economics of everything, including your gamification elements, is very, very important. And this is actually sometimes very understated. And it's very cool to have all these new things, but you need to have that. And the modular glass sales, basically, we were able to implement and give people the choice because we distributed out the cost. And that was, we took the cost for the consumer, which was basically the consumer is only going to pay $2. The government subsidy you would get, which was 4.5, which is already existing. Then you would take the NGO subsidy, and in total you would then get the price of the product at 8.5, which now allows us to add all these kind of new things that I just talked about. But at the same time, the user is only paying $2. But you're still taking that amount. It's still important to take that amount because then you increase the ownership. And a good example for this is that a lot of people in Africa, they may not have access to electricity, but they're willing to pay for 2 or 3 mobile phones. And we use the multifold approach. A lot of people here might be aware of this marvelous facets of user experience. We looked at the fact, okay, we had to have affordance as a dynamic. We needed to have utility and at the same time value. Value was very important. It has to be at the core of what you do. And then this was created for websites, but suddenly we realized you can use it for glasses, for program design, and the way we went about this. We basically overcame this one-size-fits-all problem. And the feedback that we got for the solution was great. This proposed solution was selected by an international jury of experts. The Financial Times gave in a special edition. The coverage really helped. The challenge itself raised awareness, and Sightsavers raised more than £1 million based on this challenge. Sightsavers International then transfers authority to Sightsavers India. And at the moment, as we speak, I've just been in touch with Sightsavers. The parts of the solution are now being implemented in 8 simultaneous pilots in 8 different places in India at the moment. So just like we have something for AIDS, where we raise a lot of awareness about AIDS, we can actually do that for visual impairment as well, as a basic human right, and the right to sight. And this is what Vision 2020 is about, making the right to sight as a basic human right as well. Can you please play the video?
I never thought I'd ever say that I need someone in this way, but I do, darling, I do, yes I do. And in the middle of the night I think of all the things you like. I do, darling, I do, yes I do. Because I'm tangled up in dreams, tangled up in dreams of long dark hair.
basically, if you realize something, I didn't use points, boards, or leaderboards in this gamification example. So thank you very much for your time.
Talk, very inspiring, the work that you guys did. So my question was around, I think, you talked about the whole challenge was not about affordability or even availability of glasses, right? It was about the stigma associated with glasses. People who even could afford them or had them available would not really, or kids in general, right, would not wear it because of cultural reasons or other stigma associated with it. So I couldn't really understand how you solved that particular part of the problem, right? I mean, how did you actually go and kind of get this to a point where the peer pressure in terms of making fun of people who had glasses, or the cultural aspects where marriageability, for example, for girls, right? I mean, that got solved, right? Yeah. So can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. Well, I didn't have, of course, a lot of time to go into the way we were implementing these. But what we did was, example, and we did some kind of testing as well. And we talked to almost more than 100 children in the northeast of India. And what we realized was that when you brought them together, and again, these are people who don't wear glasses and people who wear glasses, and you made them play, and it would actually overcome these barriers. But it was not enough to just make them play. You actually had to extend that over to the families, to the teachers, and that's why the whole program was developed in such a way that the teachers as well sort of took this as their own responsibility, and not just government's responsibility or someone else's. And it was the same with the parents. Now, a lot of the time, the children are actually not able to, maybe overcome parental or societal barriers, because that's where the problem sometimes is more stronger. And that is why some of these games and the awareness campaigns were designed for the parents much more than for the children. And when we took that out to the field, what we found was that the parents warmed up to the idea, they actually changed, and they actually even realized that, well, we didn't think that this was such a big problem. And that is where the problem is. It's about education, it's about unawareness, which we sort of tackled. And that helped bring down these social barriers, also because it wasn't just a case of, well, it's just because it's not just your child's problem, it's the whole society's problem. And if you don't take care of it, this is how it affects you, and it affects your poverty. And when you related that to those direct people, they actually then uptook it. And we had data to support that.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, people in the back over there.
Lovely talk.
Thank you.
So I wanted to ask you, when you talk about Vision 2020 or IABB and all that, so they may primarily concentrate on the rural market, rural sector, right? So how did you specifically, come up with solutions for the rural sector? Because for them, gamification or all these things are like Greek and Latin, right?
Yeah, but that's the point. The idea was to use, and anyone can use game elements. Anyone can use gamification elements. And what we did was basically we used them. You might not even have to call them gamification as such, but what we used was game elements. We used play, we used engagement, we used activity, we used confirmation, curiosity. We used all these elements to bring about the change that we wanted to. And that can be done in some kind of, that's what I was talking about, that when you design a program and you think about gamification, which is embedded to bring these elements out, it works better than if, let's say, that you design a platform and then just say, oh, let's add some kind of gamification element, which is what you see, for example, in industry a lot today, is that they might just add a layer, and a lot of that layer would be just some points or badges, which basically have no meaning. What we did was we created meaning with the elements that we were using, so that that meaning could be translated right to the end user and to the whole scale of users who are going to use the whole solution. So, and we also were able to, so what we did was, and this, again, this is important, be in the field, to be able to test in the field, and to be able to actually, validate all the hypotheses that we had was very important. So we actually went and validated the stuff, and we found that this stuff actually works. And in some cases, it worked more better than our expectations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Telling strategy, more than gamification.
Well, it's storytelling right here.
I know. So I'm saying that if you can use storytelling to market whatever you need to market, your concept or your product, why would you necessarily bring in technology? Does gamification work better for technology-related products, whereas storytelling works for products like these, which are not, you don't necessarily have to be on a tablet, or you don't have to have a game to explain your story. You can use puppetry, you can use drama, theater. Maybe that would have worked equally well.
Well,
so what made you use technology?
So there were two sides who were involved in this program. And these were high-level CEOs and NGO program directors who have a lot of field experience. And they were talking about, well, aren't you actually doing, not helping these children by giving them access to technology, because then they will spend more time indoors and therefore it's not healthy. And I think that's sort of in today's world, that is a rubbish opinion. The reason being, almost 80% of us even sitting here, even while listening to this lecture, we take out our phones, we access the smartphone. We cannot live without the internet. We cannot live without connectivity. How can we expect the same children who are from another class or whatever to not want to do the same? And the question is not about creating that kind of divide, but actually using technology to bridge divides, which is what was important. The other aspect that we looked at was this kind of, why did we use two different elements? So I know you talked about theater, and you talked about how you could use drama and all these things, and these were part of it as well. We did not totally eliminate them in the sense that we had events. These events would have a lot of those kind of elements because they also help, but storytelling is also part of gamification. Narratives is one very important part of gamification because you always need to be able to tell a story to be able to connect to someone. And there are many ways to do it, and we used multiple ways because there could be different types of people, and we were trying to reach out to the broad spectrum. There were some people who would identify with the theater, whereas someone else would probably identify with the tablet. And so one was to reach the broad spectrum, and the other was also that these people who use technology, when they are sitting with a tablet, what you realized when I showed was the tablet was only limited to 1 or 2 players. It was not a social game. And when people are on their own, so children are spending time on their own and they're spending this time, that's when the tablet would be very educational, when you learn and you sort of are spending the time on your own. Whereas the social games that were built around the board or the other things, that was more when you start involving the parents, you start involving the teachers, you start involving people who don't wear glasses but have to be empathized towards people who wear glasses. So that's where we introduced that. So it was really basically a broad spectrum approach, which is why we needed to have the technology solution as well. So.